hope you're all as inspired by our honorees, our presenters, our MC, and also our folks at Common Cause. Before I briefly outline in hopefully 5 minutes about our plans for next year, I want to thank and congratulate our remarkable Executive Director, Susan Lerner, and her staff of only 3 people, count them, for their impressive accomplishments on redistricting, where progress hadn't been made for years, for the exposing the staggering amount of dark money spent by special interest groups, all with very noble sounding names, on advertising, on trying to change public opinion through advertising, and to ensure that thousands displaced by Hurricane Sandy were able to cast their votes. As anyone who's been involved in good government knows, you can never rest on your laurels. There's always a lot more to be done. And true to form, we have a lot of new opportunities in the year ahead. Not surprising, meaningful campaign finance reform leads the list. What is surprising is that for the first time in decades, we actually have a chance to achieve it in New York State. Why now, you're probably asking? For 2 reasons. First enunciated by John Gardner, and more recently by Governor Cuomo. Both believed that government would never reform itself from within. Change would require principled leaders who could educate and unite the public behind the need for reform. That was number 1. And public pressure from citizens on politicians to make government work as it should. Thanks to the efforts of reform groups, civic and political leaders, and the press, the public is not only aware of the poisonous impact of money in our political system, but actually favors a complete overhaul of our campaign finance system in New York State. This includes public funding with matching funds for small dollar donations, lower contribution limits, and disclosure of outside spending. In a recent statewide poll, New Yorkers backed these reforms by 79 to 8%, with a proportion in favor very close among Democrats, independents, and Republicans. This is not only a bipartisan issue, it is a nonpartisan issue, and the voters know it, and they're aware of it. Will these reforms actually make a difference? You bet. First, citizen participation in elections increases dramatically. In New York City, which has a successful public funding system that actually Common Cause helped design and update, 47,000 donors contributed to council members who ran under the system versus 776 who contributed to those who opted out. That will give you an idea of the spread. And when voters contribute, they get involved in the issues, they know what the issues are, and they're involved in the election. Second, more candidates want or are able to run than before. They don't require and aren't beholden to wealthy donors. And if they're elected, they can actually spend more time working. What a novel idea. I don't know how many of you read Senator Carl Levin's reasons for resigning this year, but first on his list was that he said, I want to spend the last 2 years of my career working on issues instead of raising money. And that's what can happen in New York State. Third, disclosure of corporate political spending works to actually curtail it. When the corporations funding ALEC were exposed in connection with the famous Stand Your Ground laws, and I guess all of you know that ALEC is funded by corporations to actually ghostwrite legislation for the various states. Their corporations' phone lines were flooded by furious consumers threatening to boycott the companies. And guess what? The corporations withdrew their support from ALEC. So this actually works to curtail some of the abuses that are going on in the system. Now that the public wants change, we have to get them to pressure the politicians to bring it about. And we plan to do that through a combination of paid media, public forums throughout the state, and press coverage. We will also lobby state legislators based not on moral principles, which often don't have much of an effect, but rather on their self-interest. How? Support for public funding is a winning campaign issue. This was evidenced by a recent election campaign of Cecilia Ketchuk, who ran for office in the newly created 63rd Senate District in New York State. She was a virtual unknown who had less funding than her opposition candidate, an assemblyman from the area, better known, and she won. And what was her major campaign issue? Public support for public funding of elections. He didn't mention public funding at all and lost. Change often begins in the states, and New York has a chance to really lead the nation on this absolutely critical issue. As John Gardner said, this is no time for small plans. Common Cause will also be hard at work on securing passage of early voting in New York State and recruitment of better qualified and better trained poll workers, so we no longer feel like we're in a third world country when we go to vote. We are well positioned to accomplish this. Last but not least, we will also be working on all fronts to defeat the legislature's proposed redistricting amendment to our state constitution, because it actually leaves our state open to gerrymandering yet again. Now that we've helped make redistricting part of the voter's lexicon, we are not about to let this happen. I want to thank all of you for coming this evening and urge you to stay involved, whether by emailing your legislators, writing letters to the editor, buttonholing friends, or funding our various efforts to achieve these reforms. As the noted cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Each of you is part of that group. Stay involved, and thank you for coming.